Joshua is right along through that, and then Joshua helps lead them beyond that point. And then we get into what we know as the period of the Judges. And this is going to take us all the way until the time of King Saul. You remember that is really the beginning of the period of the kings. And so we're going to look here, roughly 1200 to 1500. Judges chapter 21 and verse. My bad, I didn't tell them. Testing. Hey, there we go. Okay, great. I can notice a little bit of a difference. It's more subtle than I like, but it is there. Okay, period of the Judges. So this is about 1,000 years before the time of Christ. Israel is in the promised land, but they don't have a king. They want a king, right? And that's the whole issue with this is they want to be like everybody else. You look in Judges chapter 21, and this has kind of been, for better or worse, the theme verse of Judges is everyone did what was right in his own eyes, right? And so you had all this competing ideology, right? What was right, what was wrong. And so what brought about really was this cycle, right? And I gave you this last week. We'll look at this every week. And this happens for almost 400 years. So this is not a short period of history. Right? Again, I gave you just a frame of reference. This is about actually a little bit longer than all of our American history, right? So you think back, what feels like, a long time ago, the period of the Judges was longer than we have of that, right? So it has sin, right? Israel's going to turn to idols. They want to be like everybody else. That's going to lead to servitude. God is going to allow oppression to teach Israel a lesson in almost every case, right? Which is going to then lead to supplication. The people are going to cry out to God, Lord, help us, right? We're tired of this, which is going to lead to salvation. And in the period of the Judges, God is going to raise up a judge, a deliverer, right? Which is then going to lead to silence and to rest. And there's going to be a time where everything's going to go well, but then it's going to cycle back to sin again. And this is going to cycle over and over again for about 400 years. We looked last week at a man by the name of Ehud that was raised up. And again, there's lots of judges, way more than we're going to cover. So this is not an exhaustive study, and we're not looking at them in any particular order necessarily. But I pulled out 4 that I think really move the needle. And then the last one's going to be a little bit of a bonus. We'll cover that in week 5. But I want to look at Gideon. So we're going to look in Judges 6 and Judges 7. I want to set the stage for you. I did this last week. Some of you said that really helped kind of set the stage for where we are. So here's what you need to know about Gideon. So this is about 7 years that they've been really what amounts to enslaved under Midian, the Midianites. You may remember that name. That comes up a lot in the Old Testament. So they've been 7 years under Midian. The harvests have been stripped every cycle. So they have almost nothing to eat because the Midianites are going to come in and take everything that they grow. The people are going to resort to hiding in caves. We'll read this in Judges chapter 6, starting in verse 1 here in a moment. A prophet is going to come. We don't know exactly who this is, but a prophet is going to come and speak and say, you forgot who I am, and you have forgotten who you are. Now that's going to come up again when Gideon is going to be raised up to deliver Israel. Gideon I love because Gideon has some amazing stories attached to him, but he is probably the quintessential unlikely hero. Doesn't want to be the judge, right? In fact, he's going to question and say, you can't mean me. I'm the least of all of these. I'm from the least family. I'm not the warrior you're looking for. But Gideon's going to be told, not only are you the pick, you're exactly the pick for such a time as this, right? The angel of the Lord is going to come to Gideon Don't know exactly who the angel of the Lord is. There's great debate about that. But suffice it to say, the angel of the Lord is going to come to Gideon in a wine press. We'll look at why that's significant starting in again, Judges chapter 6. All right, let's read this together. Judges 6, starting in verse 1. We won't read all the verses associated with Gideon. But listen, again, with all that context in mind, within the theme of unlikely heroes, listen to the first 12 verses, and we'll read a few more after this as we get a little further into the lesson. The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. So in essence, that's describing the first two kind of tenets of our cycle, right? They sinned. God allowed difficulty and oppression as a teaching vehicle. The hand of Midian overpowered Israel, and because of Midian, the people of Israel made for themselves the dens that are in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. And whenever the Israelites planted crops, the Midianites, the Amalekites, and the people of the east would come up against them, and they would encamp against them and devour the produce of the land as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance in Israel, no sheep or ox or donkey. For they would come up with their livestock and their tents, and they would come like locusts in number. Both they and their camels could not be counted. So they laid waste to the land that they came in, and Israel was brought very low because of Midian. And the people of Israel cried out for help to the Lord. I want you to, again, put yourself in the shoes of Israel for a moment. They've sinned. They've been oppressed. Again, the Midianites are not completely taking over the geographical land of Israel, but for all intents and purposes, they could have been, right? They've come and taken all their food. They've resorted to hiding in caves, and now they're crying out saying, God, we can't do much more of this, right? The cycle is repeating. Israel had done what was evil in the sight of God. They were oppressed, right? And I want you to pay attention to the material harvest, because you see a spiritual parallel here, right? They had been what was taken physically, right? Midian came and stripped all their fields bare. But Israel was spiritually starving at that time too. And that's the great parallel that God wants them to understand is you're spiritually starving, but you're more concerned about the physical starvation, right? If you had never spiritually starved, you wouldn't be in this position. That's the great lesson in all this. God's people had wanted to blend into the culture that was around them, right? You go back to Deuteronomy 7, right? You see this over and over again of wanting to be like the people around them. And God says, we talked about this morning in our class, he says, that's a slippery slope, right? It's a slippery slope when you want to go find the pagan nations and say, we like culturally what they're doing, right? The king looks great and their gods look enticing. Let's intermarry. Let's go do things like this. And God says, hold on now. All of this is not wrong in principle, but it becomes an issue when you compile it all together and then God, gets pushed out of the equation. Things are going to go south, and they did. And that's exactly where they're going to find themselves. So you go and you reread verse 6. Israel was brought very low. And it says the people cried out to God. That's part of this cycle of the Judges. And really, again, the Judges are worthy of our study. A lot of good stuff in the Judges. But spiritually speaking, the time of the Judges is a tumultuous time in Israel's history. There are some good years, right? We looked last week, Ehud. When Ehud finally delivered Israel, there was a period of about 80 years where things were good. But there was a lot of hurt and a lot of disobedience and a lot of lessons that had to be learned to get them to an 80-year period of peace, and then it cycles all over again. So the Judges are a period really up and down spiritually. So they're at a low right now. They're crying out to God. And again, let's read 8 through 10 together. Judges 6, 8 through 10. So the Lord sent a prophet to the people of Israel. Again, we don't know exactly who this is. Doesn't totally matter. But he said to them, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I led you up from Egypt, and I brought you out of the house of slavery. He's setting the stage for what's going to amount to a really good lesson. Pay attention here. And I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. He's setting the stage and saying, have I not been with you and your fathers and your grandfathers all this time when you were in as bad a spot as you could have imagined, being enslaved in Egypt? Did I not get you out of it? Have I not provided for you? Have I not given you land? But notice what he says in verse 10. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the God of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But the kicker is at the very end here. But you have not obeyed my voice. He says, on paper, you have had every reason to be confident. You've had every reason to go and to do as I've said. Have I not shown you that I will show up again and again and again? But in spite of all of that, you haven't obeyed. That's a cycle that God's people have always and will always struggle with to some degree. That balance of, yes, God has given us and delivered us over and over, and that's true for us, right? We could spend all afternoon writing down all the ways that God has taken care of us in the past when we certainly didn't deserve it. But does that mean that we're not going to still make mistakes? No, we will. But God is wanting them to understand that obedience, right? And we're going to look at this in a minute. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but his big issue is, I'm not asking for perfection here, but I am asking for participation. I'm asking for obedience. I'm asking for you to care enough to try to move the needle. Let me fill in the gaps. You're not going to get it perfectly, and that's okay. But that's still the message, right? It's not perfection, but it is participation. So the way I want to phrase this, and this may not make a ton of sense if you've never read the story of Gideon, but you're going to figure this out as we read it together. Finding the warrior within, doing it Gideon's way, right? Because that's in essence Gideon's story. Gideon is going to be raised up as a deliverer, as a judge, as a warrior, as a fighter, and he's going to say, God, I'm not the pick. I can't be the pick. My family's not the pick. I'm not personally it. There's got to be somebody better. But God says, you are the pick. I've picked you for this reason. And I want us to think of it this way, because again, every day we go out into battle in some regard. And many times we feel like Gideon, right? We're given a mission to go and to fight against the forces of darkness and the things that we are continually pushing against and making our beliefs known and all these, and say, Lord, I can't do it. I'm just not the guy. But God is going to point and say, you are the guy, as Gideon was. So how do we do this? I'm going to offer you three things. Number one, learn to see ourselves the way that God sees us. Friends, that may sound whatever, but it's an important distinction that I hope, and if you've never thought of it, I hope you'll consider it. Probably of the three, if you take nothing else away, I hope you'll consider this. Do you see yourself the way God sees you? That's going to change a lot in your life if we can learn to do this well. God names Gideon by plan, not by surroundings. God is going to tell him, it's not because of all the things you've done, all the successes you've had, all the battles you've won. That's not the reason you're the pick. You're the pick because you're faithful and because it's part of my plan for you to be the pick. When you and I go out into the world, many times the surroundings aren't there, right? You say, Lord, I don't know how I'm going to fulfill your will here and here and here. And God's going to say, because it's not about you. It's not based on your ability. Based on your ability, you would fail. But let me come fill in the gaps because of plan, not because of surroundings. Look in 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2 in verse 9. We get a little bit of the insight into the mind of God. It says, but you are a chosen race. Listen to this. Listen to the way that you and I as Christians have been described. do we think of it this way? You are a chosen race. You are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. You are a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. What a beautiful New Testament, really, example of, God, I don't feel like the pick. I don't feel like the warrior that's able to go out into battle and fight for you. But God's looking down and saying, but hold on, Christian, are you not a chosen race? Are you not a royal priesthood? Are you not a holy nation? Perhaps my favorite of this list. Are you not a people of his, God's own possession? Do you not belong to me? Friends, if the fact that you and I belong to God does not change the way you go out and live your everyday life, something's wrong. You and I should go out with every ounce of confidence to say, Lord, I don't see the plan always, but I know who I belong to. I know that I belong to you, and I know that I've got names and I've got descriptors given to me that I certainly haven't earned, but if that's the way you see me and you created me and the world that we live in, why should I doubt it? That's Gideon's position. Lord, I don't see the plan, but if you're telling me that I'm the guy, then let me go live that out. Matthew chapter 5. If you and I understand 1 Peter 2 to say that, again, it's not about patting us on the back. It's saying that I have value because I've been given value by the creator of the universe, then Matthew 5 should mean a whole lot more. Matthew 5, 14 and 15 says, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand and give light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Friends, see yourself the way God sees you. And again, this is not a self-help pep talk. This is a spiritual principle that should change the way you wake up every morning. Because recognize that this is one of the things that in many ways is expected of us. Go out into the world and be a light. I don't blame you, because I struggle with it too, to think, Lord, how am I going to be the light? How am I going to be the difference? How am I going to be the city set on a hill? Go back to 1 Peter 2. Because God sees you differently than you may see yourself. We fight from who God says we are. I read that this way. When you and I go out into the world, we fight from a position not of who we are in actuality, not of the fear and the doubts that we assign to ourselves, but we fight from the position of who God says we are, which is his chosen possession. All right, number 2, how do we find Gideon's way? How do we find the warrior within? Drop the excuses and start with the strength that you have. Start with what you have. Let's read 13 through 16 together of Judges 6. Again, this is Gideon being called here. So really, if you go back to verse 12, now Gideon's at the wine press to hide from the Midianites. Verse 12, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. I'm certain that that is not the descriptor that Gideon would have given to himself in the moment. Because again, just one verse prior, it's telling us that Gideon is hiding in the wine press. He's trying to not be on the radar of the Midianites or anybody else. He's just wanting to survive the day. But the angel of the Lord comes and says, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. And Gideon said to him, please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, did the Lord not bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hands of the Midians. And the Lord turned to him and said, go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of the Midian. Do I not send you? And he said to him, please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. And the Lord said to him, and listen to the response. The Lord said to him, but I will be with you, and you will strike the Midianites as one man. Gideon was just trying to survive. Gideon was trying to get through the day. And again, you look down through this, Gideon's initial protest, right? If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened? We can empathize with that position to at least some degree, right? Why is all this happening? But then God's charge, he goes back and says, go in this might of yours. Do I not send you? Right? He's saying, if I've given you the task, if I've given you the power, why are you not willing to go? Why don't you have the courage to go? Gideon's going to give excuses. He's going to say, is my clan not the weakest? Am I not the least of the weakest clan in my father's home? But then God's going to give the promise. He says, but I will be with you. And you will strike down the Midianites as one man because I'm with you. Which leads us to number 3. Refuse the fear of failure, fear regret more. That is to say, don't be afraid of failing, being afraid. If you're going to be afraid of anything, be afraid of not trying. The regret of not going and doing what we know we have the opportunity to do. Let's read Judges 7 together. Again, we're going to skip ahead just a little bit, and I want to read the first 7 verses of Judges 7. Because this is where Gideon's really going to get the plan in earnest for what he's going to go do. Gideon, there's a lot of amazing things that happens in the life of Gideon. You probably know just a few verses prior at the end of chapter 6, he's going to ask from a sign of God, right? The fleece that is out his tent, whether it's wet or whether it's dry, Lord, God's going to give him a sign in that way. But God's also going to test Gideon. And pay attention here, first 7 verses. Then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod, and the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Morah in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel boast over the saying, my own hand has saved me. Now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. And the 22,000 of the people returned, only 10,000 remained. The Lord said to Gideon, to the people are still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you. And anyone of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, shall go with you. And anyone of whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, shall not. And so he brought the people down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink. And the number of those who lapped, putting their hands to their mouths, were 300 men. But the rest of the people knelt down to drink the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, with 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hand, and let all others go, every man to his home. Put yourself in Gideon's shoes. You started with tens of thousands. Still a formidable task. Again, not that long ago, you're hiding in a wine press. You're being told, hey, you're going to go and deliver your people. And he says, I'm not the guy. My family's not the family. I'm not the member of this family. But God says, you go with the confidence that I've given you. You gather together the army that you do have. Still is going to be a challenge. And God says, there's too many. Even if you do win, all your people are going to think that you did it, that they did it, that it wasn't for me. We need to thin the herd a little bit, right? So we're going to give everybody an option. If you're scared, go home. But then he says, it's still too many, right? He lost over half his men in that one swoop. And then he says, still got too many. Let's take them down to the water. Let's observe how they drink. And he gets them down to 300 men. That's it. And he says, now I'm ready to go. Gideon is the unlikely hero of unlikely heroes. But God says, this is the way. Again, don't be as afraid of failure, because that is exactly where Gideon's going to find himself. He's going to take 300 men to fight an army that has oppressed the entire nation of Israel for 7 years. He's going to be in a position of fear. And God says, it's not the fear I'm worried about. What I want to make sure is, are you willing to go do it? Even with the fear, and let me make up the rest. And that's what Gideon's going to go do. Faithfulness is being greater than the fear that we have. That is the great story of Gideon. Again, God isn't asking for perfection, but he is asking for our participation. He's asking Gideon, do you believe me when I tell you I'll deliver the Midianites into your hand, 300 men or not? It could be you alone, and if I tell you you're going to win the day, you're going to win the day. John chapter 16. As we wrap up this morning, John 16, have you considered the implications of Gideon in light of the Gospel of John? Jesus is talking, says, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. He's promised us. This is not the only place he talks about it, but he says, in the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, because I've already overcome the world. I've already overcome the hurdle that you're struggling with. Gideon is the unlikely hero. He's going to go on and fight a wild battle against the Midianites where God is going to deliver them in a tremendous way. Maybe we'll study that another time. But getting Gideon to the battlefield is what makes him an unlikely hero. He's hiding in a wine press, right? He's wanting nothing to do with the war, so to speak. But God says, you're going to be my guy. You're a mighty man of valor. And he looked within and he said, Lord, if you're with me, I'll go do it. I'll be your hero. I'll be your judge. Only if you're here. Jesus has already told us, you may be afraid, you may endure tribulation and hurt, but don't let that win the day, because I have already overcome the world. This morning, if you aren't a Christian, we want to give you that opportunity, that you could come and put on Christ in baptism. Again, Jesus has already won the day. It is just a matter of time until we get to go back and be with him for eternity. But just as Gideon had men and God wanted obedience, he wanted the people that would do as he said to do. You and I still have an opportunity to say, Lord, I know I've got sin, and I want to go in the waters of baptism. I want to fix that. If that's your need this morning, we'd love to help you with it. If we can do anything for you, would you come let us know about it as we stand and as we sing together?